these photos here and seeing who has the best background today. I know at the last meeting, I think Brian Bird won for his Notre Dame background. Let me see. Brian's got a pretty good outdoor background right now. Let's see. All right, Victor's got is that Alaska in the background, I think, for Victor? Can anybody top him? Well, I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. I'm sorry about the meeting reminder snafu there. Looks like we still have a really good crowd of folks that were able to join us. So we will hold today's call to an hour and provides us some great time here to kind of connect on the work that you all have been doing with some of the pre-work for our Innovation Jam session. So we're so happy to have you on and to check in again. Before we get started, a couple of notes. One is that during part of today's session, my co-facilitator here, Brian, is going to be recording the meeting and doing graphic facilitation of the meeting. So you'll have the pretty cool opportunity to see the meeting in action as Brian graphically facilitates it. So that will be a fun thing. We'll send out the notes from the meeting and his graphic facilitation after the fact. The other thing I'll note is we are going to throw it to everybody to provide kind of their thoughts and reflections related to the work that you've been doing. I'll ask everybody to, if you want to raise your hand and provide that reflection on the work you've been doing. Hopefully we'll have a number of people who are looking forward to share. If it's crickets, we'll go ahead and just kind of randomly ask for a few people to share their experience so far in terms of the process. So without anything further, let me go ahead and hand it over to Brian, and we're going to start with a video, and then we'll do a couple of initial poll questions and get everybody's feedback. But Brian, take it away.
Thanks, Robert, and welcome everyone. Just a couple of initial notes. So we are, in addition to the graphic recording that I'm going to be doing digitally, I'm also recording the actual video, which we can share out later just for your reference in case you want to go back and maybe share with anyone on your team. So this video is being recorded. Right now, everyone is muted, but I've given you the ability to unmute yourselves. And as we get into a little bit more interactive part, I'll ask you to do that. If you'd prefer, as we get into it, to not speak, you can just raise your hand. And that is in the participant menu of Zoom. Victor, thank you very much for helping me find that option. So again, you can unmute yourself. It looks like right now we're standing at around 26 participants. So let me go ahead and kick off this video, and we'll get to it. If for any reason someone cannot hear the video, just go ahead and raise your hand and I will send you the link. Actually, I'll just go ahead and post the link on chat just in case. Here we go.
For the past 5 years, I've been investigating this question of where good ideas come from. It's the kind of problem I think all of us are intrinsically interested in. We want to be more creative, we want to come up with better ideas, we want our organizations to be more innovative. I've looked at this problem from an environmental perspective. What are the spaces that have historically led to unusual rates of creativity and innovation? And what I've found in all of these systems, there are these recurring patterns that you see again and again that are crucial to creating environments that are unusually innovative. One pattern I call the slow hunch, that breakthrough ideas almost never come in a moment of great insight, in a sudden stroke of inspiration. Most important ideas take a long time to evolve, and they spend a long time dormant in the background. It isn't until the idea has had 2 or 3 years, sometimes 10 or 20 years to mature, that it suddenly becomes accessible to you and useful to you in a certain way. And this is partially because good ideas normally come from the collision between smaller hunches, so that they form something bigger than themselves. So you see a lot in the history of innovation, cases of someone who has half of an idea. There's a great story about the invention of the World Wide Web in Tim Berners-Lee. This is a project that Berners-Lee worked on for 10 years. But when he started, he didn't have a full vision for this new medium he was going to invent. He started working on one project as a side project to help him organize his own data. He scrapped that after a couple years, and he started working on another thing. And only after about 10 years did the full vision of the World Wide Web come into being. That is, more often than not, how ideas happen. They need time to incubate, and they spend a lot of time in this partial hunch form. The other thing that's important when you think about ideas this way is that when ideas take form in this hunch state, they need to collide with other hunches. Oftentimes, the thing that turns a hunch into a real breakthrough is another hunch that's lurking in somebody else's mind. And you have to figure out a way to create systems that allow those hunches to come together and turn into something bigger than the sum of their parts. That's why, for instance, the coffee house in the Age of the Enlightenment, or the Parisian salons of modernism, were such engines of creativity, because they created a space where ideas could mingle and swap and create new forms. When you look at the problem of innovation from this perspective, it sheds a lot of important light on the debate we've been having recently about what the internet is doing to our brains. Are we getting overwhelmed with an always connected, multitasking lifestyle? And is that going to lead to less sophisticated thoughts as we move away from the slower, deeper, contemplative state of reading, for instance? Obviously, I'm a big fan of reading. But I think it's important to remember that the great driver of scientific innovation and technological innovation has been the historic increase in connectivity and our ability to reach out and exchange ideas with other people and to borrow other people's hunches and combine them with our hunches and turn them into something new. That really has, I think, been, more than anything else, the primary engine of creativity and innovation over the last 600 or 700 years. And so yes, it's true we're more distracted. But what has happened that is really miraculous and marvelous over the last 15 years is that we have so many new ways to connect and so many new ways to reach out and find other people who have that missing piece that will complete the idea we're working on, or to stumble serendipitously across some amazing new piece of information that we can use to build and improve our own ideas. That's the real lesson of where good ideas come from, that chance favors the connected mind.
Okay, awesome. So a couple reasons why we wanted to share that with you. And Robert, I'll go ahead and I can find you on this list on you too. A couple of reasons that we wanted to share this video in particular. First of all, it uses drawing, which that's awesome. The second thing is that it has a couple of really good points that we thought would be a good cue up for not just this webinar, but also the work that we're going to be doing together in Chicago. So one of the things that it says is that it's how necessary it is to make a space for innovations. The way that he says is to collide with the ideas of others. And so, you know, specifically talking about the coffee house and the Parisian salons, that's our intent with the innovation jam that we'll be doing in Chicago in just a couple of weeks. The other thing is that he talks about, you know, the idea of the slow hunch, and it's our hope that through the use of the templates that we've designed and the playbook, which we'll actually introduce you to when we get to Chicago, is that you see that as a structured approach to making those connections. Robert, any additional ideas that you want to share with regards to the video before we jump into the next thing?
No, I think that's great. I just like the idea that we're going to try to recreate the Parisian salon in Chicago. So yeah, should be fun. No, thank you, Brian.
Sure. Okay, and then just to go back to the agenda, if right now you should be seeing a picture of a guy who's definitely not Robert next to a black and orange screen. And so we've done the video. The next thing that we're going to do, let me turn the video on so we can click the box on that one. The next thing we're going to do is a little bit of polling. So we want to get a kind of a pulse check on what we think the state of the state is with innovation across Volunteers of America. And so let me go ahead and launch a poll. You should see on your screen of choice some questions pop up. And you should see them right now if I've done it properly. And so when you see this, just go ahead and work your way through these questions. And when they're done, I'll go ahead and share them back to the group. Okay, it looks like we're at about 19 out of 28 people, or 67% of folks have voted. Okay, we haven't seen anybody else beyond the 19 vote. I'm going to assume that that's because some of the folks have dialed in by phone and don't have access. So I'm going to go ahead and end the polling now, and we'll see what results we got. Okay, so can everybody see the poll results? Brian, I can see you. Give me a thumbs up if you can see it. Yes, thank you. Okay. So let's see where we're at. Do you consider yourself to be very innovative, somewhat innovative, occasionally innovative, not really innovative? So it looks like we're in the middle, kind of floating around though, the one idea that sticks a month, okay? Question number 2, my organization regularly learns from or co-create solutions with our beneficiaries. So this is interesting. We've got somewhat disagree, bit of a bell curve around the middle, around somewhat disagree and agree. Although if you were to add up the somewhat agree and mostly agree, that would be pretty strong, kind of where it is with the somewhat disagree now. So it looks like it's about an even split between the agree and disagree. Moving down to the third question, my organization regularly exchanges ideas with other organizations and individuals. So this one's definitely trending towards the agree side of things, mostly with a somewhat agree, and then kind of a little bit on the degree side, but this one's a little bit more on the somewhat agree side. So I'm wondering if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, is anyone surprised by these results, or is this what you were expecting? And again, you should have the ability to unmute yourself if you want. Robert, I automatically unmuted you. If you want to share any reflections that you've got.
Yeah, no, I just think that's kind of really interesting results that kind of reflect that our jam session approach here is on target to perhaps push us a little bit in terms of looking at ways that we can collaborate with beneficiaries and members of the community to create innovation, but also to leverage some of the stuff we're doing really well in partnering with other organizations in going after innovation opportunities. So it tells me we're doing some really good stuff, but that we also have some room to grow in both of those areas. So I'm excited that we'll kind of work together towards that goal of growing in the way and the space that we collaborate.
Okay, thanks. And again, if anybody else wants to share their reflections, just feel free to unmute yourself.
Man, this is Brian. I mean, I think the hard part is defining beneficiary. You know, I know we all do satisfaction surveys and those kind of things, but actually, you know, when do we get a chance to get them in a room and have, you know, brainstorming sessions that fit with what their functioning level is, I guess, for lack of a better word, you know, with somebody with intellectual disability or a veteran or other things. I think that's the part that those beneficiaries we have trouble really getting info on with. That makes sense.
So what I heard, Brian, just to restate a little bit, is it can be difficult to get the actual beneficiaries in the room to be a part of the process with this. That's interesting. So that's something definitely we're going to talk about when we're in Chicago. Okay, so let me end the poll.
I was going to add something. So this is Patty. Hi.
Hi, Patty.
Hi. So I was going to add that I was actually surprised that people felt that they were so frequently innovative, and we've always struggled around that word innovative. And I put down, once a month, but I don't know that, like, if someone said, okay, tell me the 12 innovative things you did this year, I'm not sure I could do that. So, I just wonder if, there could be a little bit of discussion around that. Although we don't have to do it now, we could certainly do that in Chicago. But that's one thing, how do people define innovative, and, are we really innovating once a month or once a week?
Okay. So let me just go ahead and capture that. And Robert, if you wanted to, again, any other reflections that you have, well, I'll make a note of that. But it's the, how do we get beneficiaries in the room? And then how do we define innovation? Okay.
Yeah, great. No, really good kind of observations and questions. I'd be interested to hear if anyone else has some thoughts on that. I'll provide my quick thoughts on innovation and how we define that in a moment. Anybody want to kind of share your thoughts on those two observations?
Okay.
So I guess I'll share just a couple of quick thoughts, both on how do we get consumers to co-create and co-design for us. And as Brian said, I think we'll certainly explore that in more detail in Chicago. So hopefully you'll walk away from Chicago with some thoughts, both from the content of the jam session, but also just talking to one another about how that has been done in the past effectively, and what are some of the tools that you might be able to use to do that. I think some of it comes down to having a couple of really solid human-centered design tools in your tool chest that you can utilize to make sure that community input is being gathered as we design new services. Some of that can be community input that goes right to consumers and has them co-create with us. Sometimes it can be co-creating with other advocates of consumers, or just using some of our research design tools to see yourself more as a researcher and observer rather than the operator of existing programs. So I think there's some kind of distinct human-centered design tools that we can start using that will achieve that. In terms of the definition of innovation, I think, as you all know, there are so many definitions of innovation out there. Even the expert sources from Harvard out there to the Rockefeller Foundation to you name it in the world of innovation, everybody's got a little bit different definition. The definition that we've arrived at and was in some of your materials we sent is this idea of Volunteers of America believes that innovation is a creative idea brilliantly executed that lifts up the people that we serve. And so what we're trying to do is really get away from innovation being linked to having to be something brand new. And so one of the articles that I sent out over the last month or so was from a little blog from Seth Godin, one of the real, principles of innovation. And he talked about this idea of making sure that we don't think that innovation has got to be that bright, shiny new thing that no one has ever done before, but it can be an idea that's already been done at another organization that we at Volunteers of America are now doing, but we're brilliantly executing that. We're putting our own Volunteers of America soul into that innovation, be it internally facing and how we work within our office space and interact within the organization, or externally facing in terms of how we deliver services. So kind of my 2 cents on innovation is we probably make it out to be something much larger than it is sometimes, in having to feel brand new, when in fact it's, again, just this idea of doing something and doing it really well with the VOA soul connected to it.
Okay, thanks, Robert. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. and then we'll move on to the next thing, which is reflecting on the work so far. So just to recap, what we've done is, as of the last webinar, we introduced a couple of new methods. The first two were on research, which is to say contextual inquiry, and then fly on the wall observation. We sent out some materials on that, so you could go out and start interviewing the people you serve and getting a little bit of data there. And then the other two were in context of your team meetings, one of them being the SPOT canvas, where you look at strengths, problems, opportunities, and threats. And then the other one looking at the context canvas, where you look at the broader context around the organization. And so we wanted to do kind of just a light check-in with you all to see how this was going, to see if there was any challenges that popped up, and just to get your feedback, and see if there might be anything that we might help on. Now, again, a couple of options for this. You can either unmute yourselves, or the other thing that you can do is you can raise your hand virtually. And again, the way to do that is to go to where it says participants, and then to go to participants, and then there should be a button that says raise your hand. Brian shared one thing that I'll share with the people on the phone. Brian Seitz, thank you for that. Actually, Victor helped out with this. Thank you. If you are on the conference line and you'd like to unmute yourself, you can hit *6, and that should take care of that. Now, in case there's a couple of people that unmute themselves at the same time by mistake, I will randomly select the first person that I see on the participants and mute them, and then I'll get back to you after the first person is done, okay? So just to check in, how are we doing with the pre-work? And I'll go ahead and open that up. Again, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or you can just hit *6 or use the on-screen commands.
And maybe we can even start with the research methods that we were asking everybody to select one of the two. Has anyone tried those research methods yet? And can you share how it's gone?
Well, that's since we've been at the New Business for the past year, or so. But this Brian. Our role, I think the fly on the wall role has been really good, but it's been more with informal discussions with program staff that I've been doing, meaning going to the sites, talking to them, really getting some good feedback from them. Every 2 weeks we have a new business development team meeting, pitch session, but this is more of, doing, it's like management by walking around, where I'm going and just kind of having informal discussions. It's that fly on the wall, hearing what they're saying and what their needs are. That's been my approach so far.
Great, thanks, Brian. Does anyone else want to share where you've used one of those two research methodologies over the past few weeks?
Hey, Robert, it's Adrian. My method was similar to Brian's, where I did get the selected individuals together and I just let them talk. And I wrote down everything that they were saying and typed up everything that was discussed during that meeting and sent it out to them for review. I do have another meeting set up with my group on Tuesday the 31st, so we can go ahead and get through the next part for the assignment.
Great. So, Adrian, you've already put together your local design team, and you have your meeting scheduled?
Yes, we already did one meeting where we did the SPOT analyst, and then the next meeting, that's going to be the meeting where we go ahead and do the final items that we need to do. And then my part comes in for research.
Okay, so you broke the pre-meeting into two meetings you thought would be the best approach.
Yes.
That's great. What's been your experience in terms of forming the team? Were you able to pull together a diverse team, and is there a kind of energy in helping you through this journey?
Yes, my team is very diverse as far as age and sex and gender. Everyone, they have different experience levels as well, not only with Volunteers of America, but just throughout their whole um, career history. So I thought that was pretty good to have, and it kind of helped with kind of comparing the different organizations that they have worked at in the past to Volunteers of America to kind of see what's different from our organization versus the other organizations that they've been at before.
That's great. Well, congratulations. It sounds like you've made great progress and you've got a good team formed around you that's really going to help you kind of move forward with this work. Would anybody else like to share their experience so far in both the research methodologies, but also your experience in organizing the team, or if you've had the meeting, actually running the team meeting?
This is Kirsten from Indiana, and we had our first design team meeting this afternoon and did our spot and context or context canvas. And I'm curious to hear about other people's experience. At least with our group, problems was the longest section, so that was something interesting with ours. And yeah, I think most of our problems were in some way related to staff experience. So some were relating to technology frustrations and other, I don't know, just kind of organizational culture related things. So that was a kind of a short summary of our experience.
That's great. Do you want to share a little bit about the process for forming the team? How was that for you, and were you able to pull together a pretty diverse team and have some energy there?
Yeah, it was a bit of a challenge for us. We had a few people drop out along the way and added some more last minute. So we had a decent sized team, and I feel like we have a pretty diverse team from different areas of the organization. We have males, females, people of various races. So unfortunately, we weren't able to get any external stakeholders. But yeah, it was an adventure.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Kirsten. Sounds like it's going well with that important first step there, and sounds like the conversation that you all had a lot of internal focus on it as you were doing the spot analysis. So that's great. Would anyone else like to kind of share their experience so far in organizing the team, running a team meeting, or doing the research methodologies?
Hey, this is Brian from Northern New England. So we've had some sort of innovation teams set up in the past, and what I learned from that experience was that when we came into this, I wanted to keep the team much smaller and focused, but much more diverse. So I've got a good mix of folks, both frontline staff, middle management, admin staff. There's 6 of us. And our biggest challenge, however, is that we are so geographically spread out that we haven't had our first meeting yet. But when we do our spot analysis and the contextual and the other components, we're going to have to do it all online because it's just not physically possible for us all to be in the same room. So that'll be a different experience. But I think I have a strong team set up, so we'll see how it goes.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Brian, and making note of the fact that you'll have to do it using remote tools. So it'll be great to hear how that meeting goes and what your experience is. So thanks for sharing that. Anybody else like to share? It looks like Harry's got his hand up there.
Hey everybody, this is Harry with Greater Ohio. Can you hear me?
Yes.
What we did is we kind of did the same thing with splitting our first meeting and going so far as getting the information ready to go into the spot canvas. Somebody else took on that responsibility, and that went out then today. Again, it's interesting from our perspective. The largest area was opportunities. So we saw a lot of opportunities, and I think it's going to be harder for us to kind of narrow that down versus the other group that kept finding a lot of problems. We only had 2 problems, but lots and lots and lots of opportunities. So for us, it was a good way to kind of break it down because we are not all in the same location. And as far as diversity of our team, what we kind of represented were only a couple of our impact areas. So what we've done is we've reached out to the other areas, and so we have a team of 7 representing our impact areas as well as admin and development. So we kind of got everybody covered there, and it was amazing for me to be online with our team because the ideas just kind of rolled out, and it was amazing to be part of that team when that was working.
That's great. Thanks, Harry, for sharing that experience. Anything in terms of putting the team together and then the meeting itself that you found to be a kind of a roadblock that had to be overcome? It sounds like it went pretty well.
We're an organization that's a little bit larger, so we have a lot of structure here. It wasn't a roadblock, but it was a little time-consuming to check with supervisors and some of the other people that I felt that I needed to kind of check with before I pulled people in. But actually, once I got a hold of the right people, I found that most people were, very much happy to be part of the team, and they were happy to lend us their executives or whatever to help us with the process. So from that perspective, not a real problem, but again, we do have such a diverse organization from the standpoint, we have retail operations, and that's different than most people, so we wanted to make sure that was represented. Our impact areas of re-entry, corrections, /corrections, our veterans line, as well as our housing line, trying to make sure we had a representation across the board as much as possible.
Great. Yeah, thanks so much, Harry, for sharing that.
Robert, if I could jump in real quick, and Ann, I see your hand. So a few things. So Brian from New England, so a couple things that you might try. Remember on the first webinar that we actually did an icebreaker using the tool BoardThing. It's a free tool, and if you wanted to, that's a great free method in order to do something like a spot canvas online and virtually with people. Alternatively, if BoardThing doesn't work out for you, you could just use Google Docs. And if you have folks that are somewhat savvy managing or working their way through Google Docs, you could have them all typing strengths, problems, opportunities, and threats into just a Word document. So that's one thing that you might do. I'm also noticing that there's a few things in the chat, so I'll read them out for the benefit of the folks on the phone. Gary Jane says, I must say that Robert's comment on not finding something shiny and new does not take some pressure off the process. To which Victor replied, agreed. My team came up with some great ideas. I just wasn't sure if it had to be new or not. So yeah, point taken. A couple of other comments. M. Orr said, I'm on the same team with Kristen Bush from Indy, and the meeting today was awesome. So great, Kristen, a little feedback for you. We were able to see not just our problems, but it was good to see the opportunities for our company as a whole. Kay Ashley says, our first meeting is Friday, October 27th. It took us a while to pull the team together. I was able to get one external member. So thank you to those who have shared. Ann, I saw your hand first, so I'm going to go ahead and lower your hand and then unmute you. I'm going to try to unmute you. I think you're unmuted. Go ahead and say something. No, it doesn't seem to be working. I'm sorry about that. I seem to have lost you. Yeah, I don't have the option to unmute you for some reason. Maybe you don't have voice enabled on your phone, on yours. If you want to look at that, when I see it again, I'll go ahead and unmute your phone. Actually, try raising your hand again. In the meantime, Patty, your hand's up. I'll go ahead and unmute you now. Go ahead.
Okay, wait, there we go. Now I'm unmuted. So I was just going to say that we're doing something a little bit different. We are in the process of forming what we're calling an under 40 and under board to try to get on new different ways of thinking with the new generation. And our board is actually a pretty old board. I would say the average age on our board is maybe like, I don't know, 70 or something like that. So I'm doing the innovation group using almost all external. I've got a couple of staff members that are participating, but for the most part, I've got another dozen or so of outside people that we're going to run through the innovation process. And our first meeting is on Wednesday.
Great, thank you. And Annie, let's see if I can pull you up for Anne. I apologize. Let's see. I'm just not seeing the button that's usually there to say unmute. I apologize for that. I'm not sure why I can't do that. If that's something that you want to go ahead and type into the chat room, I'll see if into the chat window, I'll see if I can do it there. But otherwise, I'm not sure how to undo this. Courtney, so I see your hand up. I'll go ahead and unmute you. This does not want to behave itself. Give me just a second, please. Courtney, could you go ahead and try speaking now?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
I was able to pull a great team together. We have 2 outside stakeholders that were able to join us on Friday, and we're very excited. We're really looking forward to kind of continuing when we get back, and we have a big community problem that we're trying to work through, and got some great community players, and everybody is very excited to see where we go from here. And I wanted to thank you guys for the outline of the meeting. I thought that was really helpful. So we'll see you all in a few weeks.
Great, thank you, Courtney. I'll go ahead and lower your hand.
Courtney.
Mute you. And I think I've got this straightened out. Can you go ahead and start talking now? Nope, that didn't work either. Okay, sorry about that. Anne says, sorry, I dialed in before going to the WebEx. I think the problem is on my side. I think you might be right. Usually there's a little control that says unmute, and I'm just not seeing it on you. So I'm going to probably get the pronunciation of this name wrong, but I'm going to say Ariel, if that's right. I'll go ahead and unmute you now. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. I'm Ariel from BOA, Illinois. You got the pronunciation pretty close, actually. Our meeting went actually really well. I wasn't expecting it to go as well as it did. I kind of thought that we would have a lot more just complaints. We'd have more in the problem section of our spot canvas, but we actually identified a lot of opportunities and then talked a little bit about some innovations we could work toward that would let us use those. We didn't get a ton of participation, but that's kind of, I did it based on volunteers, but I did have some pretty good diversity with it. We had a couple managers, a couple frontline staff members, and then a couple people from the administrative side. So we got a lot of good feedback and a lot of different opinions.
Okay. Thanks, Ariel.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead and mute your phone. And I'll lower your hand. Okay, I don't see any more hands up, and I don't see any more comments in the chat. If there is anything else that you want to bring up around this, feel free. Robert, anything else before we move on? And we're just at about 4:40 local time.
No, I think at this point, thank you for all the feedback there. I will make one note, and I can't remember if we mentioned this before, which is if you haven't run your team meeting yet, when you do run that design team meeting, please take photos. Or if you already ran it and you took photos, please send them to us. We would love to get some kind of action photos of your teams kind of working together with that pre-meeting. So please take photos and send them to us. We really want to let people know across the organization what we're working on here. The other thing I would note is we do want to collect the work product from those pre-meetings. So if you can do two things. One is send them to me once you've completed the meeting and you've kind of done whatever editing that you do or don't want to do to those exercises. Please send them my way. We'd love to try to do a little bit of synchronizing and pulling out themes ahead of time from that work product, but then also just bring the work product to Chicago with you as well, so that you've got that as part of your reference and you can kind of pull out that team thinking at the meeting itself. So photos plus send us your notes, please. So I think that's it, Brian, for the reflections. I think we can probably move it over to any questions that you all have regarding either the pre-work in any roadblocks that you have that Brian or I might be able to help on, or the rest of the participants may be able to help on, or if you just have any general questions regarding logistics or other elements coming up towards the jam session. I'm also very much available for any questions off to the side if you want to shoot me an email or set up a quick call with me. So why don't we open it up, Brian, for kind of questions that folks have, both on the pre-work, but also any logistical questions.
Sure. So same as before. And again, raising your hand, you're going to want to go to the participants window and then click where it says raise your hand. Alternatively, you can just type into chat. And then finally, if you're only joining us on the phone, you can hit *6. So I see Brian again, and you know, I see that your hand's up, but Brian, I think you're probably dialed in by phone. Could you?
I should be unmuted.
There you go. Yep, I can see you now. Go ahead, all you.
Yeah, I figured out the secret combination. I'm not going to share it though. So I do have one question. There was in one of the early emails that you sent out, Robert, there was some contract or something that we were supposed to sign by the 23rd. I'm not sure that I have signed anything. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So that contract did not go out. So you all did your part, and there was nothing to do. We are going to send that out over the next week. There was a bit more work that needed to be done on it, so we held it. So that is still going to come out. What we'd ask is just to have you complete that by the time of the jam session in Chicago. So we'll push out the date on that and send it out this week. It's going to be I think, as I shared, essentially a learning contract that's similar to what the Keymakers program is using, that really kind of reflects that, you know, the jam session really extends beyond each of us to our affiliates, and we really want to kind of bring back as much as possible to each of our offices. And so it really documents that kind of relationship and taking back our learning to our local organization. So great question, Brian. You'll see something this week.
Great, thanks.
And I do want to know how you did that. Anyone else? Robert, I'm wondering if you want to give maybe if you can, a little bit of a sneak preview of what's in the contract, because I'm assuming if people are coming to Chicago, that there's an assumption that they would be on the hook for whatever it is that they would have signed up for in the contract. Maybe it'd be a good idea for folks to know what they're signing up for.
Yeah, well, I mean, the contracts, it's pretty simple. It's basically saying we all agree to take the experience and share it back at our local offices. And to be honest, what we're doing with the pre-work is already creating that take back. We're making sure that each of us are forming local teams and we're already connecting our local offices into our work. And so the contract is not much more than that, which is just further reaffirming that intent for you to each take your learnings back to your offices and sharing that more broadly than just having a great experience in Chicago. So that's what it is. There's not a bunch of kind of must-fulfill contract items or things that you're going to find are hard to do. It's just a general commitment that I think all of us already have to share that learning and really connect this experience back.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I don't see any other hands up. I don't see anyone has unmuted themselves, and I don't see any comments in the chat. Why don't we hold it open for just a minute just to make sure someone's not waiting or is having technical difficulties.
The only other question I saw is Amy was asking that she didn't realize we only needed to do one research method and was something missed in the material. I think we tried to reflect somewhere in the material that you only needed to do one. Frankly, if you did both research methods, way to go. You know, the more of these research methods that we implement, the better and the stronger our basis for our work becomes. What I found with a lot of the human-centered design methods, and you'll see this at the jam session, is some of them are kind of, you would say, wow, that's pretty obvious and straightforward. But then once you start to implement them, you realize there's kind of a mind shift that has to take place, and there's practice that has to take place around some of those human-centered design methodologies. And it really only comes with doing them kind of over and over again. So if you do have time to do both of those methodologies, go for it. All the better. If you only have time to do one, that's fine as well.
Okay. So again, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. No hands up. Okay.
Well, why don't I go ahead and then close our call and just say, you know, thank you everybody for the work that you've already done. I'm super excited just kind of hearing the progress that's already been made in terms of pulling teams together, running some of the meetings, your experience so far. So I'm ecstatic. This is really cool. You know, what we're doing here in bringing local design teams together and what our time will be in Chicago. So thank you so much. Again, if you got questions.
Hang on.
We got one more question here. Victor.
Let's go ahead and see if you can type, or Victor, and in the meantime, I'll see if I can't unmute you. Yep, you should be live now, Victor. Go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. I just thought of this because the question came up in my team meeting. Are we supposed to focus on processes exclusively external to VOA or internal as well?
Well, so what we'd like to do is to be sure that you really have an eye towards both, that you're not entirely looking internal and what we can change in terms of internal innovations. We really want to make sure that the teams are also focusing on external opportunities. So really take a mindset to capture both. And you could, you know, you'll intentionally, as you facilitate the meeting, need to emphasize that to pull out those different needs and ideas.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the question, Victor.
Great question. All right, if there's nothing final, thank you so much, everybody. Great conversation. We'll send out these pretty cool notes that Brian took for us during the meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you in Chicago.
All right. Bye now.
Thank you.